I watched in furious disbelief as the HOA cops, yes, that's what we called them, deliberately positioned their vehicles, blocking my driveway. A surge of anger pulsed through me. My precious vegetable garden, the one that had sustained me through months of agonizing unemployment, was now inaccessible. Little did these neighborhood tyrants know, lurking within the dense, almost unreadable fine print of our county ordinances was a single, powerful legal detail. This detail wouldn't just save my garden, it would expose their entire corrupt scheme to the world. Comment below where you're watching from. The patrol car, deceptively painted to resemble an official police vehicle, slowed to a halt in front of my house. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. It wasn't the actual police, but something far, far worse. The Pinecrest Homeowners Association patrol car, complete with ostentatious gold badges plastered on the doors. It stopped directly in front of my driveway garden. I practically threw down my watering can, rushing outside, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level, though a tremor of anxiety ran through me. Brenda Reynolds stepped out, clipboard clutched in her hand like a weapon. She wore a jacket emblazoned with HOA Enforcement, the embroidery practically screaming authority. Her artificially blonde hair was pulled back so severely that it seemed to stretch her face into a permanent, unsettling frown. "This is completely unacceptable," she declared, her voice sharp and condescending, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at my thriving tomato plants. "This used to be a respectable neighborhood." Her tone dripped with disdain. 6 months ago, I'd lost my engineering job when the factory, the lifeblood of our town, shut its doors. Bills were piling up, reaching for the sky like an unscalable mountain, and my job applications seemed to vanish into a black hole, unanswered. Desperate, I'd transformed my concrete driveway into a miniature farm, a symbol of resilience. I used salvaged pallets and clearance sales soil bags from the garden's center. Each tomato I coaxed from the earth meant one less I had to buy at the store. It was survival, pure and simple. "It's just vegetables," I explained, my voice tight with suppressed frustration. "For food." Brenda scribbled something on her clipboard, her pen scratching against the paper like nails on a chalkboard. Section 123 clearly states all visible landscaping must be approved by the board. This looks like a junkyard." My gaze flickered to her own yard. Just behind her, a massive, gaudy water fountain, definitely not on any approval list I'd ever seen, dominated the space. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. I'll look into the rules," I managed to say, forcing a calm I didn't feel. She snapped a photo with her phone, the click echoing like a gunshot in the tense silence. "You have 7 days to remove this eyesore or face daily fines." The threat hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. As her car pulled away, my neighbor David walked over from his porch, his expression a mixture of sympathy and warning. "Don't let her bully you, Mike," he said, his voice low. "She tried to make me take down my wind chimes last month, claiming they were noise pollution." "How can she fine me for growing food?" I asked, incredulous. "Half the neighborhood has gardens." David pointed to the back of his house. "Not in their driveways. They can't regulate what they can't see from the street. That's why my vegetable patch is safely behind my fence." I shook my head, despair creeping in. "I don't have a backyard, just that tiny patio that gets no sun." "Then you might have real trouble, Dan," David warned, his voice grave. "Brenda Reynolds isn't just any HOA board member. Her husband owns the biggest real estate company in town. They're trying to flip this whole neighborhood, turn it upside down for profit." That night, sleep evaded me. My driveway garden wasn't just a hobby, it was my lifeline, feeding me while I desperately searched for work. The 20 raised beds, overflowing with life, produced enough vegetables to slash my grocery bill in half. I'd even been selling the surplus at the farmer's market, a meager income that covered gas money. I pulled out the HOA rulebook, a relic from when I'd moved in 3 years ago. The landscaping section, back then, was a mere 2 pages. Now, the updated version Brenda had so generously left was a monstrous 26 pages, a labyrinth of regulations governing everything from grass height to the acceptable color of garden hoses. Section 123 indeed mentioned visible landscaping needing approval, but it specifically referred to permanent changes. My garden beds sat on top of the driveway. They weren't permanent at all. A flicker of hope, tiny but defiant, ignited within me. The next morning, fueled by coffee and a simmering sense of injustice, I photographed every inch of my garden, documenting its temporary nature. Then, I embarked on a reconnaissance mission around Pine Crest, my phone camera, my weapon. I documented every HOA violation that was being conveniently ignored. Unapproved basketball hoops, decorative flags, gaudy lawn ornaments, and, most importantly, Brenda Reynolds' extravagant, water-guzzling fountain. If they wanted to play by the rulebook, I needed to know precisely which rules actually mattered. 3 days later, I spotted Brenda and 3 men in matching smug polo shirts measuring my driveway with laser tools. They were placing bright orange stickers on my garden beds, marking them for destruction. "Excuse me," I called out, my voice shaking with a mixture of anger and fear. "This is private property." The tallest man, a human wall of indifference, barely glanced up. "HOA regulations give us authority to inspect for violations. This garden takes up 63% of your driveway, exceeding the 25% modification allowance." "There's nothing in the bylaws about driveway percentages," I challenged, my voice rising. He handed me a paper, fresh off the printer, with a date that made my blood run cold. "New amendment, passed last month," he said, his tone devoid of any emotion. I'd never seen this document before. As they drove away, a chilling realization dawned on me. They were making up rules just for me. That evening, Brenda parked across the street, a silent, menacing presence, taking pictures of everyone who stopped to buy my tomatoes. When Mrs. Gonzalez, the elderly woman from down the block, brought me a homemade pie in exchange for zucchini, Brenda swooped in like a hawk. "You shouldn't encourage rule breakers," I overheard her saying, her voice dripping with venom. "This used to be a nice neighborhood before people started turning it into farmland." Mrs. Gonzalez, bless her heart, clutched her bag of vegetables defiantly. "I've lived here 30 years, longer than you, Donna. Back then, everyone grew food and shared with their neighbors." "Well, times change," Brenda snapped, her voice like ice. "Property values matter now." After Mrs. Gonzalez left, I noticed a white envelope tucked into my garden fence. Inside, a check for $500, a small fortune, and a handwritten note. "For your garden supplies, don't let them win." It was signed, "A neighbor." Who would pay $500 to help save my garden? And why were they afraid to reveal their identity? The anonymity was unsettling, yet the gesture filled me with a renewed sense of determination. That night, I slept fitfully in my living room, anxiety gnawing at me, worried the HOA might try something under the cover of darkness. Around midnight, headlights swept across my windows. I peeked through the blinds, my heart pounding. It was Brenda Reynolds' husband's luxury car, idling in front of my house. He was talking on his phone, pointing at my property. Even with the windows closed, I could make out a few words. Perfect location, after we clear them out. My blood turned to ice. What exactly were they planning? This felt far bigger than just my garden beds. Much, much bigger. And I was about to find out just how far they would go to get what they wanted. The blood-red letters stamped across the envelope made my stomach drop. Final notice before legal action. Inside, a formal letter on heavy paper, embossed with the Pinecrest Hills logo, demanded I cease and desist all unauthorized agricultural activities immediately. The daily fines would start at $100 and double each week until my garden was removed. The letter was signed by William Peterson, HOA president, with Brenda Reynolds' signature underneath as Enforcement Committee chair. I couldn't afford even 1 day of these fines. My savings were almost gone, depleted by 6 months of unemployment. Despair threatened to engulf me. That evening, while checking my tomato plants for pests, I noticed David watching from his driveway. He waved me over, looking around nervously before speaking. "They're not just coming after your garden," he whispered, his voice conspiratorial. "They've got bigger plans. My cousin works for city planning. Reynolds Development just filed papers to build luxury condos in Pinecrest Hills. They can't tear down an entire neighborhood," I exclaimed, my mind reeling. "They don't have to," David explained, his voice grim. "They just need to make living here so miserable that people sell cheap." He pointed to 3 houses with full for sale signs, all clustered together. "Notice how they're all being sold by the same real estate company, Reynolds Realty." The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. So the HOA is helping them drive property values down temporarily? Exactly. They buy low, change the zoning, build fancy condos, and make millions. David handed me a business card. "My sister's a lawyer. She helps people fight predatory HOAs. First consultation is free." The next morning, I called the number, hope flickering anew. I spoke with Priya, David's sister. She listened patiently, her voice calm and reassuring. "Their tactics are becoming common," she explained. "They create impossible rules, selectively enforce them against certain homeowners, then swoop in to rescue people by buying their homes at 70% of market value. Can they really force me to remove a garden that feeds me?" I asked, the question burning in my throat. "That's where it gets interesting," Priya said. "Most states have laws protecting homeowners' rights to certain activities. I need to research your county-specific ordinances." While waiting to hear back from Priya, I installed security cameras around my property. The anonymous $500 check had given me enough for a decent system, and I had a feeling I'd need proof of whatever happened next. That night, my cameras caught 2 men in dark clothing approaching my garden at 3:17 a.m. They weren't stealing vegetables. They were pouring something on my plants. By morning, half my tomatoes had withered, their leaves turning a sickly black. I collected soil samples immediately, my hands shaking with fury. "We need to test this," Priya said when I showed her the video footage. "If they used chemicals to destroy your garden, that's criminal property damage." The soil tests confirmed my worst fears. Commercial-grade weed killer, strong enough to contaminate the soil for months. I couldn't simply replant. The entire garden was poisoned. When I returned home from the testing lab, a crowd had gathered in front of my house. Brenda Reynolds stood in my driveway with William Peterson and a police officer, her face a mask of righteous indignation. "See, officer, I told you it's a public health hazard," she was saying, pointing dramatically at my damaged plants. "Who knows what diseases these rotting vegetables might spread?" The officer looked uncomfortable. "Ma'am, dying plants aren't a police matter. The chemicals they're using could be dangerous," she insisted. "What about children who might touch these plants?" My blood boiled. They poisoned my garden, and now they were using that as evidence against me? I approached calmly, my phone recording in my pocket. "Officer, I have security footage from last night showing two individuals trespassing on my property and poisoning my plants with chemicals. I'd like to file a report." Brenda's face flickered with surprise before she regained her composure. "That's ridiculous. Why would anyone poison vegetables?" "I have the soil test results right here," I replied, holding up the lab report. "Commercial-grade herbicide not available to regular consumers. The kind used by professional landscaping companies." The officer took my report seriously, examining the video footage on my phone. "Do you recognize either of these individuals?" he asked. I couldn't identify them clearly, but their build matched two men from the HOA Enforcement Committee who had measured my driveway days earlier. As the crowd dispersed, Brenda lingered. When the officer was out of earshot, her friendly mask slipped off, revealing the predator beneath. "You're fighting a losing battle," she hissed, her voice low and menacing. "This neighborhood is changing, whether you like it or not. Smart people are selling while they can still get decent offers." "Why target me specifically?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and fear. "Other people have gardens." Her smile turned cold, cruel. "Your house sits on the corner lot we need for the development entrance. The faster you leave, the better for everyone." As she walked away, my phone buzzed with a text from Priya. "Found something. County Ordinance 479. No homeowner association may restrict reasonable food cultivation during declared drought emergencies. We're still under the drought declaration from last summer. Call me ASAP." My poisoned garden lay in ruins, but for the first time in weeks, I felt a surge of hope, powerful and defiant. Brenda Reynolds and her HOA cops thought they had all the power, but they had overlooked one crucial legal detail. Now, I just needed proof connecting them to the garden vandalism. And I knew exactly where to start looking. I rushed home from a nerve-wracking job interview, spotting strange figures on my property from 2 blocks away. 3 men, sporting identical blue polo shirts with Halo enforcement embroidered on their chests, were crawling around my garden beds, armed with measuring tapes and clipboards. My heart leaped into my throat. They hadn't wasted any time. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" I called out, nearly tripping in my haste as I ran from my car. "You can't just walk onto my property." The tallest man, a gray-haired individual with a military-style haircut that screamed authority, didn't even bother to look up from his laser measuring tool. "Actually, we can," he stated flatly. "I'm Doug Peterson, head of enforcement. HOA bylaws, section 221, gives us full authority to inspect any visible violations." "But there's nothing in the bylaws about garden size," I argued, stepping between him and my prized beefsteak tomatoes, a surge of protective anger coursing through me. Doug finally looked at me, his face utterly blank, as if he'd practiced this 1,000 times in front of a mirror. Section 104.7, Aesthetic Consistency Requirements. This garden is exactly 8.2 square feet larger than the permissible lawn conversion. Plus, the tomato stakes exceed height restrictions by 3 inches. He delivered the information with robotic precision. A small crowd of neighbors had begun to gather at the edge of my lawn, drawn by the commotion. I spotted Brenda Reynolds watching from her BMW, sunglasses perched on her nose despite the cloudy day, a tiny, almost imperceptible smile playing at the corners of her mouth. The sight of it made my blood boil. "Show me where it says I can't grow food," I demanded, reaching for Doug's clipboard. He yanked it away, his movements quick and practiced. "We've received 7 separate complaints about odors, insects, and unsightly vegetation. The HOA board voted unanimously last night to take immediate action." "Last night?" I protested, my voice rising in disbelief. "I wasn't notified of any meeting." "Emergency session," Doug replied flatly, "properly posted on the community bulletin board at the pool." The pool that had been closed for renovations for the past 3 weeks. The absurdity of it all was staggering. One of the other men, younger, with slicked-back hair that reeked of arrogance, emerged from my backyard. My backyard. "Sir, we've documented additional violations behind the property," he announced, a smug look on his face. "Compost bin exceeds size restrictions. Rain barrel not on approved list. Chicken wire not on approved materials list." "You went into my backyard without permission?" I was shouting now, which I realized with a sinking feeling was exactly what they wanted, to make me look unstable, irrational, in front of the growing audience. I took a deep, calming breath, trying to regain control. "I'll need copies of all these supposed violations in writing," I stated, my voice firmer now, "plus documentation showing where in the HOA agreement each item is prohibited." Doug smirked, clearly prepared for this. He handed me a thick folder, heavy with accusations. "You have 72 hours to remedy all violations, or fines begin at $100 per day per violation. We've documented 16 separate violations. $1,600 daily? That was more than my monthly mortgage." I flipped through the paperwork, frantically searching for any mistakes, any overreach I could challenge. The HOA had been meticulous, their attention to detail almost obsessive, except for one glaring error. "This document is addressed to the property owner," I pointed out, a small spark of triumph igniting within me. "I'm a renter." For the first time, Doug's carefully constructed composure cracked. We'll need to update that." A small victory, but I savored it. As the enforcement team packed up, they stuck large neon orange violation notices on each of my garden beds, a blatant display of power. Brenda Reynolds finally emerged from her car, strutting across the street in designer heels that sank slightly into the damp grass. "Such a shame," she announced loudly, her voice carrying across the lawn, seemingly addressing no one in particular. "Some people just refuse to understand community standards." I bit my tongue, remembering my landlord had mentioned Brenda was on the HOA Financial Committee, the committee that controlled my security deposit. As the crowd thinned, David, my next-door neighbor, whispered, "Don't give up. They tried this with my backyard pizza oven last year." I nodded gratefully, but my thoughts were racing. A whirlwind of calculations. How much savings did I have left? How long could I fight this? What would happen to my garden, my precious food source? In the meantime, an unexpected voice broke through my panicked thoughts. "Young man, excuse me?" It was Mrs. Gonzalez, the 80-year-old widow from the blue house on the corner, tapping her cane lightly on my driveway. She carried a cloth-covered basket. "Your tomatoes helped with my arthritis salve last month," she said, her voice surprisingly strong, a hint of steel beneath the gentle tone. "My husband and I grew victory gardens during the war. This isn't right." She handed me the basket. Warm empanadas and a jar of homemade salsa, their aromas filling the air. "Thank you," I whispered, deeply touched by this small yet profound act of kindness. "Come, I'll show you something they don't want you to know," she said, gesturing towards her house. I walked Mrs. Gonzalez home, listening intently as she explained how the HOA had changed drastically when Brenda Reynolds joined 3 years ago. "They care more about appearances than people now," she sighed, a hint of sadness in her voice. I promised to visit properly tomorrow, and hurried back to start reading through the violations folder, desperately searching for any weaknesses in their case. The street was quiet now, the drama, apparently, over. But as I approached my driveway, a sickly sweet chemical smell hit me, making my stomach churn. My steps quickened. The garden beds looked wrong. The vibrant greens had dulled, the leaves curled at the edges, a grotesque parody of their former health. A plastic spray bottle lay partially hidden under the zucchini plants, a silent testament to the deliberate act of sabotage. I touched a tomato leaf. It crumbled between my fingers, turning to dust. Every single plant, weeks of painstaking work, my upcoming meals, the only productive thing in my bleak unemployment, had been deliberately, maliciously sprayed with weed killer. I sank to my knees in the dirt, a wave of rage and disbelief washing over me, so intense it brought tears to my eyes. Through the blur, I noticed a small slip of paper tucked into one of the dead plants. Neat handwriting, almost mocking in its precision, read, "Next time, follow the rules. Who would destroy perfectly good food? And what kind of person had I, unknowingly, become their enemy? They poisoned your food!" David's voice boomed across 3 houses as he examined my dead garden the next morning. His normally calm face flushed with anger. "That's not enforcement, that's vandalism." I hadn't slept, spending the night photographing every withered leaf, every chemical-burned stem, and the spray bottle left behind, a cruel reminder of their ruthlessness. When David saw the "Follow the Rules" note, he pulled out his phone, his fingers flying across the screen. "I'm calling the police, Vedekti," he insisted. "This is destruction of property." 2 officers arrived quickly. They took notes, bagged the bottle for fingerprints, but their expressions told me everything. This would go nowhere. "Civil matter," the younger officer muttered, his tone dismissive. "HOA disputes aren't criminal unless there's major property damage." "These plants were worth hundreds of dollars," I argued, my voice rising in frustration. "File a claim with your renter's insurance," he suggested, before walking away, leaving me standing there, defeated. David placed a hand on my shoulder, his grip firm and reassuring. "Don't worry, this isn't over." He wasn't kidding. Within an hour, he'd posted pictures in our neighborhood Facebook group. By noon, my phone was buzzing non-stop with messages from angry neighbors, people I'd never even met. At 2 p.m., a knock at my door revealed Mrs. Gonzalez holding a tray of seedlings, tomatoes, cucumbers, and peppers, their vibrant green a stark contrast to the devastation in my driveway. "Already started them for my grandchildren," she announced, her voice filled with determination. "But you need them more." Before I could properly thank her, another car pulled up. Tom and Sarah Johnson, the young couple from Oak Street, carried lumber, soil, and fresh garden stakes. "We read about what happened," Sarah said, her eyes filled with concern. "Tom's a carpenter. We thought we could help rebuild somewhere they can't mess with it." My tiny living room, usually so empty, began to fill with unexpected allies. Mr. Abernathy, the quiet, retired man from the corner house, brought printouts of county regulations and property laws. "The HOA fined me $500 for installing a wheelchair ramp when my Martha was dying," he explained, his voice shaking slightly with the memory. "Said it wasn't aesthetically consistent with neighborhood standards. Had to remove it a week before she passed." He fixed me with watery blue eyes, filled with a quiet, simmering rage. It's time someone stood up to these bullies. More neighbors arrived. The Patels, with samosas and legal advice. Mrs. Patel was a paralegal. The Gonzalez grandchildren, with hand-painted signs reading, "Food is not a violation." Even shy Miss Rodriguez, who I'd only ever waved to before, brought state gardening protection pamphlets. "Did you know," David said, spreading maps across my coffee table, "that HOA regulation enforcement is limited to front-facing, visible elements? Backyards have far fewer restrictions." Tom nodded, sketching quick garden bed designs. "We could build raised beds behind your fence line. They'd need a warrant to even see them." Mrs. Gonzalez tapped her cane for attention, her voice surprisingly loud and clear. "In 1943, The government encouraged victory gardens during rationing. I still have the pamphlets proving food gardens were considered patriotic duty. The real issue, Mr. Abernathy interrupted, his voice gaining strength, is selective enforcement. Look at these. He spread photographs showing various HOA violations throughout Pinecrest Hills. Brenda Reynolds' own non-approved fountain, the HOA president's oversized boat parked in his driveway, the board treasurer's unapproved flag display. They're picking targets, Mrs. Patel confirmed, her voice sharp and precise, only enforcing rules against certain people. The Pinecrest Freedom Coalition formed that very afternoon, in my cramped living room. Our first action, moving my garden operation to the backyard, legally outside the HOA's direct purview, while meticulously documenting every instance of selective rule enforcement. As everyone helped install the new garden beds behind my fence, Mrs. Gonzalez supervised from a lawn chair, her presence a comforting anchor. When I moved here 30 years ago, neighbors helped each other. She reminded us, her voice a link to a kinder, more community-oriented past. Before these fancy rules took over, by sunset, I had new garden beds filled with fresh soil and Mrs. Gonzalez's thriving seedlings. The coalition had assigned roles. Mr. Abernathy researching legal precedents, the Patels documenting violations, David creating a secure online forum for affected homeowners. As everyone left, promising to meet again in 2 days, a strange feeling washed over me, a mixture of gratitude and determination. I'd lost my garden, yes, but I'd gained something far more valuable, a community. I stayed outside, watering the new plants until long after dark. The quiet purr of a luxury sedan made me look up. A black BMW crept past my house, then stopped. The window rolled down, revealing William Peterson, the HOA president himself. "Got a minute?" he asked, his voice low, almost conspiratorial. I approached cautiously, garden hose still in my hand. "Look," he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I didn't approve what happened to your garden. That went too far." "Then why not stop it?" I demanded, my voice laced with suspicion. William glanced around nervously. "This isn't just about your garden. Brenda Reynolds is running for city council. She needs this neighborhood looking perfect for her campaign. Photographers are coming next week." The pieces clicked together with blinding clarity. So this whole crackdown is about her political ambitions. "I didn't say that," he backpedaled quickly, "but between us, she's using her HOA position as a launching pad, wants to show she can clean up a neighborhood. That doesn't give anyone the right to destroy food," I countered, my anger simmering. "No, it doesn't," he agreed, surprising me. "But I'm warning you, if you keep fighting, they'll find other violations. Your fence is half an inch too tall. Your mailbox is the wrong shade of brown. They measured your grass last week. It's 1/8 of an inch over regulation height. They'll bankrupt you with fines." I studied his face, trying to understand his angle. "Why tell me this?" "Because I've lived here 20 years. This used to be a real neighborhood." He shook his head, a hint of sadness in his voice. "But watch your back. Brenda Reynolds doesn't like losing." As his BMW disappeared around the corner, the water still running, overflowing my shoes, a realization hit me like a blast of cold rain. This battle had transformed completely. It wasn't just about defending my little garden anymore. It was about power, control, and one woman's ruthless political ambitions that threatened the entire community. And in his warning, William Peterson had just handed me exactly what we needed to fight back. "Got it!" I shouted, nearly spilling my coffee as I found the hidden rule. My hands trembled as I reread County Ordinance 479, the words practically leaping off the page. "No homeowner association may restrict reasonable food cultivation during declared drought emergencies." I checked the county website again, my heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and disbelief. We were still officially under the drought emergency declaration from last summer. This was it, my golden ticket, the legal weapon I'd been desperately searching for. "David, look at this," I whispered over the phone at 11:30 that night, barely able to contain my excitement. "They broke actual county law by destroying my garden." "That's huge," he replied, his voice equally animated, "but we need to play this smart. Brenda Reynolds has friends at City Hall." Over the next 3 days, our little coalition worked tirelessly, gathering evidence like seasoned detectives. Mrs. Gonzalez, bless her sharp memory, recalled, "Remember when the HOA approved Mr. Peterson's massive koi pond during the same drought? Mr. Abernathy, with his meticulous nature, found photos of board members' yards, showcasing their own blatant, unapproved structures. Sarah Johnson, our paralegal friend, helped us organize everything into a bulletproof presentation, a legal masterpiece designed to expose their hypocrisy." The monthly HOA meeting arrived on a stormy Tuesday evening. Attendance was usually low, precisely how the board preferred it, a small, easily controlled audience. But tonight, thanks to our relentless phone campaign and the buzz circulating throughout the neighborhood, nearly 60 residents packed into the community center, a sea of expectant faces. Brenda Reynolds tapped her microphone impatiently, her perfectly coiffed hair unruffled by the storm raging outside. "First agenda item, exterior violations in Zone 3. We've noted 17 infractions." I stood up, 50 copies of the county ordinance clutched in my hands, my heart hammering against my ribs like a drum. "Point of order," I said clearly, my voice amplified by the microphone, walking to the front of the room. "Before we continue, I'd like to address the illegal destruction of my garden." Brenda's smile hardened, her eyes narrowing. "This isn't on the agenda. Please sit down or you'll be removed." "I think everyone here needs to see this," I replied, my voice unwavering, passing out the ordinance copies. The rustling of paper filled the room. My garden was legally protected under county law. The HOA violated this ordinance when you destroyed my food plants during an active drought emergency. Brenda snatched a copy, scanning it quickly, her face flushing a dangerous shade of crimson. This is irrelevant. Our bylaws clearly state county law supersedes HOA regulations," David interrupted, standing beside me, his voice strong and resonant. "That's not opinion, that's legal fact. And we've documented every violation the board has selectively enforced," added Mrs. Gonzalez, surprising everyone with her forceful tone. She opened a photo album with carefully placed photos. "My daughter took the pictures last year. Here's Mrs. Reynolds' new fence, 2 feet taller than regulations allow. Here's Mr. Peterson's boat, parked in his driveway for 6 months against Section 8 rules." The room buzzed with whispers, growing louder with each piece of evidence presented. People began raising their hands, then simply standing up, their voices a chorus of outrage. "You approved the Miller's pool, but denied my children's basketball hoop. You forced the Smiths to remove their religious symbol, but allowed others to keep theirs. You fined me for my garden gnomes, but said nothing about the Williams lawn flamingos." Brenda banged her gavel desperately, her carefully constructed facade crumbling. "Order, this meeting will come to—" "Why the different rules, Mrs. Reynolds?" I asked, raising my voice just enough to be heard above the growing din. "Is it because some people are running for city council and need certain neighbors gone?" The room fell silent, a stunned, breathless silence. I hadn't meant to reveal that card so soon, but her panicked expression told me I'd hit the mark, squarely and devastatingly. William Peterson, usually silent at meetings, suddenly spoke, his voice surprisingly calm. Perhaps we should table this discussion and consult our HOA attorney before proceeding. Excellent idea, I replied, seizing the opportunity. That gives Channel 7 News time to prepare their story. They're very interested in how an HOA destroyed food gardens during economic hardship while allowing water-wasting decorative features for board members. Great headline for someone running for city council, don't you think? Brenda's face turned ghostly white. For a moment, I thought we'd won, that the truth had prevailed. That's when Doug Peterson, her loyal attack dog, whispered something in her ear. Her color returned, followed by a cold, chilling smile. "This meeting is adjourned," she announced, her voice regaining its steely edge. "Security, please escort these disruptive individuals out." Two men I'd never seen before approached us. Not security guards, these were private muscle, hired thugs in cheap suits. "You'll regret this," David muttered as we were ushered out, the injustice of it all burning in my throat. "They've got nothing," I assured everyone outside, trying to project a confidence I didn't entirely feel. "We have the law on our side." Mrs. Gonzalez squeezed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "You did well, mijo," she said, her voice filled with a quiet wisdom. "But powerful people play dirty." Her words proved prophetic. At 6:17 the next morning, a loud, insistent knock woke me. A stranger, his face devoid of expression, handed me an official-looking envelope and walked away without a word. Inside was an eviction notice, effective immediately, 30 days to vacate. The letter claimed my rental agreement had been purchased by a new owner who wished to occupy the property. The new owner, Pinecrest Capital, LLC. I called my original landlord in a panic, my voice trembling. "Sorry, man," he said, his tone apologetic but firm. "Got an offer I couldn't refuse. Sold the place last week." My hands shook as I searched online for Pinecrest Capital, LLC. Nothing came up, except an address, the same address as the HOA office. "How can I fight for the neighborhood?" I whispered to my withering tomato, "if I cannot even keep my home?" I couldn't sleep. The eviction notice sat on my kitchen table like a ticking time bomb. 30 days. The timing wasn't a coincidence. It was a calculated, deliberate act of retaliation. "This doesn't make sense," David said, pacing my living room the next evening, his frustration evident. "They're going to crazy lengths to stop one garden." "It's not about the garden anymore," Mr. Abernathy said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. All heads turned to the elderly man, who rarely spoke, but when he did, his words carried weight. "It's about making an example. If you win, others might challenge them too." Sarah Johnson, our paralegal friend, frowned at the eviction papers. "This Pinecrest Capital, LLC, something smells fishy. No web presence, no corporate history." "Could be a shell company," suggested Tom, his brow furrowed in thought. "But why bother for one small house?" Mrs. Gonzalez wondered, her voice filled with concern. She'd arrived with a casserole despite her arthritis flaring, a testament to her unwavering support. Suddenly, an idea sparked in her eyes. "What if it's not just your house?" The room fell silent as we considered this chilling possibility. "Check the property records," Mr. Abernathy suggested, his voice gaining strength. "I worked in real estate for 40 years. The county keeps all sales in public databases." I booted up my old laptop, its fan whirring like a dying bird, while Sarah made calls to former colleagues, her network of contacts proving invaluable. 2 hours later, our jaws dropped collectively, a collective gasp of disbelief filling the room. "Pinecrest Capital purchased 7 properties in our neighborhood in the past 3 months, Sarah announced, spreading printouts across my coffee table, each document a damning piece of evidence. "All on the north side, near the main road. And look at this," I added, turning my laptop around to show everyone the screen. "Pinecrest Capital, LLC was registered just 4 months ago. The listed agent is M. Williams Consulting. William Peterson, David exclaimed, his voice filled with outrage. The HOA president. Mr. Abernathy nodded grimly. Classic move. I've seen it before in other neighborhoods. First, enforce strict rules to lower property values and upset homeowners. Then, buy properties cheap from frustrated sellers. But why target the north side specifically? Mrs. Gonzalez wondered, her brow furrowed in confusion. Tom Johnson, who worked for the city transportation department, pulled out his phone, his fingers flying across the screen. After a few minutes of searching, he whistled low. Folks, the city council is voting next month on a commercial zoning expansion along Murray Road. If approved, residential properties there could be converted to businesses. He paused for dramatic effect. The north side of our neighborhood borders Murray Road. So this isn't about my garden at all, I said slowly, the realization hitting me like a punch to the gut. They're trying to flip the whole neighborhood. Brenda Reynolds gets elected to city council to push through the rezoning, David finished, the pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity, while William Peterson quietly buys up properties to sell at a massive profit, and anyone who causes trouble gets targeted by the HOA until they leave. Sarah squinted at another document, her expression turning grim. There's more. Pinecrest Capital made a $25,000 donation to Reynolds for City Council last month. That can't be legal, I exclaimed, my voice filled with outrage. It's a gray area, Sarah replied, her voice tight with frustration. Technically, a business can donate to campaigns, but this is clearly a conflict of interest. We need to go public, Tom insisted, his voice filled with determination. This is corruption, plain and simple. They'll deny everything, I cautioned, my mind racing. We need solid, undeniable proof of the connection between the HOA enforcement, the property purchases, and the rezoning plan. David's teenage daughter, Amelia, who had been quietly listening while doing homework, looked up, her eyes sparkling with an idea. Brenda Reynolds's campaign website says she's hosting a donor reception tomorrow night at the country club. What if someone could get in and hear what she's telling her supporters? We all exchange glances, a plan forming, unspoken but understood. I serve at those events sometimes, Mrs. Gonzalez said, her voice surprisingly strong. The catering company always needs extra hands. They never look twice at the help. The plan formed quickly, a desperate gamble, but our only option. Mrs. Gonzalez would work the event, her age and unassuming demeanor providing the perfect cover. Tom would use his city employee badge to access planning department files, searching for any further incriminating evidence. Sarah would dig deeper into the property records, tracing the money trail. What about your eviction? David asked me quietly, as the others discussed strategy. One battle at a time, I replied, my voice firm despite the knot of anxiety in my stomach. Saving the neighborhood comes first. The next evening, we waited anxiously for Mrs. Gonzalez's call, our nerves stretched taut. When my phone finally rang at 11:22 p.m., her voice trembled with excitement. You won't believe what I heard, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Brenda Reynolds told the donors they'd see a 300% return on investment once the Pinecrest Hills commercial corridor is approved. She showed maps. They're planning to demolish the whole north section for shops and restaurants. Did she mention the HOA's role? I asked, my heart pounding. Better. William Peterson was there, introducing her as the partner who will make our vision reality. He bragged about how they've been encouraging turnover in key properties. She paused, her voice dropping to a whisper. And Miho, they specifically mentioned your house as the last holdout in Phase 1. My stomach dropped. No wonder they'd attacked my garden so aggressively. My house, my little haven, sat at the future entrance to their planned development. 5 days. We had 5 days to stop a corrupt HOA president a power-hungry city council candidate, and their wealthy backers from destroying our neighborhood. And I still had that eviction hanging over my head, a constant, looming threat. I stared at my struggling garden plants, recently replanted after the chemical attack. Against all odds, tiny green shoots were pushing through the soil, a symbol of resilience, of hope. "We're not going down without a fight," I told them, reaching for my phone to call the local news station. Sometimes, the smallest plants have the deepest roots. This story teaches us the importance of community, standing up for what's right, and the power of seemingly small actions. One person's seemingly insignificant garden became the catalyst for a neighborhood to unite and fight against corruption. It highlights how crucial it is to be informed, to question authority, and to use the legal system to protect our rights. It also shows that even the most powerful individuals can be defeated when ordinary people come together with courage and determination. What are your thoughts on this story? Have you ever experienced a similar situation with an HOA or a powerful entity? Share your experiences and thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories that inspire and empower.